traditional limits. So our first guest is Beth Lowry. Before becoming the president and CEO of Holder Construction, a major U.S. construction firm with projects in more than 30 states, and you may have seen their signs, they're all around the large skyscraper construction projects in anywhere you'd like, yes. So Beth Lowry worked in multiple roles over her 30-plus year career, including her first position as an intern. Her exposure to construction began after a chance opportunity to serve as an administrative assistant on a construction site that was in Miami during her senior year of high school. She later found a great fit at the Rinker School of Construction Management at the University of Florida. A nice background music for your introduction. Dance. So Beth joined Holder Construction and spent the first several years of her career as a pre-construction manager, was moved into roles of increasing responsibility, and was made president of Holder Construction in 2022, and then last year named CEO. She's joining a tiny number. We were talking earlier. I don't think there's probably more than a handful, if even a handful, of women CEOs in the construction industry. When you think about it, only 10% of the entire U.S. construction industry, the workforce, are women, so only 10%. So we're really honored to welcome you, Beth. Thank you for joining us. Police Chief Janet Moon is a 40-year police veteran, originally from Cedartown, Georgia. Originally from Cedartown, Georgia, she began her career in the Army, serving as a military police officer, and then going on to work at the Rome Police Department, where she became the first female motor officer, and this was after she was told women don't ride motorcycles. And eventually she rose to the rank of lieutenant. Later she joined the Suwannee Police Department as a captain over the field operations and communication divisions. She became deputy chief and second in command of the department, and then chief of police in Peachtree City in 2015, after the city had experienced 3 police chiefs in just 6 months. And I remember that. I'm from Peachtree City, and we were so grateful when Janet came along. She immediately introduced what's called servant leadership. I'm sure you've all heard of that, which is treating all officers with respect, directing all officers to use their tongue to talk to the community, and embodying the words to serve and protect. She was the first woman to be named to the Georgia Board of Public Safety, which she was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp, and the first woman named president of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. And by the way, only 8% of the country's police chiefs are women, only 8%. So we really feel honored to welcome Janet. She said I could call her Janet. She likes to be called Janet Lee Moon. That's her real name. And so we feel honored to welcome you, Janet. Thank you. So, Anya, I'm so glad you made it. I met Anya when she was a teenage prodigy at the Aviation Career Enrichment, which is also called ACE, which a nonprofit flight school which helps kids, especially from underserved areas of Atlanta, learn all about aviation. From basic aerodynamics to becoming a licensed pilot. It was there that Anya soloed at age 17, and then she went on to pursue a double major in air traffic control and flight management at Middle Georgia State University, and was the first black woman to earn a flight management degree from that university. She joined Endeavor Air and then rose to captain by age 26. Then impacted by the COVID pandemic, she shifted her flying career to Ohana by Hawaiian, and then Lanai Air, becoming the first black female captain of both airlines. Then she came home, yay, to Delta Airlines, where she made history once again, becoming the second black female captain at Delta, and the youngest to achieve the captain rank at any major U.S. commercial airline. Interesting to note, women represent less than 4% of all U.S. commercial airline captains, and black women are far fewer than that. So you can imagine that you're definitely in the minority. So we're excited to welcome you, Captain Anya Kearns. Now, I want to add that all three of our guests are members of multiple associations within their industries, community-based boards, and often seen around the country speaking and supporting women in their respective industries. It would have taken me all day to go through the list. So, all right, so let's get into our discussion. This is going to be fun. Beth, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about your journey into construction. I mean, what attracted you into construction of all the things that you could have done?
Well, failure usually attracts you into something different. And I actually started at the University of Florida with a hope to be a cardiologist. I don't really like blood. But I didn't know that until much later in life. But I started out at UF with high hopes and dreams of just, like every 18-year-old, you have no idea what you want to do. And I was a weed out student, and I had to make a choice. Either I was not going to make it at the University of Florida, or I was going to find another major. And because of all the science orientation that comes with pre-med, it actually transferred over pretty well into engineering. And because of my little short stint of a summer job where I worked on a construction site, construction does a terrible job in career counseling in high schools, and I had no idea that was even a thing, to go, lead and manage and be a part of a construction site. And so, the University of Florida's construction program is amazing, and I was very fortunate to talk to them early enough to make that change. Funny story, I knew pretty early on that, I knew nothing really about the industry, and that, it would be a good idea to get an internship, and those were far and few between when I started that. And I knew nothing about Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from the Northeast. I grew up in Cape Cod. My city was Boston, and I just assumed every city had tea. Well, we do have public transportation, and we have sweet tea. Yes. But we don't have a great train station to get you everywhere. And so anyway, I came to Atlanta to do this internship with Holder, and it was pre-Olympics, and I didn't really know much about the city. I didn't have a car, and I was like, well, how am I going to get to work? So it's just a funny little story, but it was an incredible opportunity, and Holder was a growing company at the time, going through their first leadership transition, and Mr. Holder was very involved with the Olympics, and Tommy was 30 years old, and he was starting to take over the company, and that was my kind of entry into the industry. And so it was really awesome. 30 years later, never would have imagined that I'd be running this company, ever.
Did you like building things when you were little, or does that have nothing to do?
Nothing to do. No, wasn't into Legos. Didn't have a dad in construction. My dad was a fighter pilot for the Air National Guard. I mean, had no connection at all. So it was really very unstrategic and simply a major that was going to take my science credits.
Interesting. And look how far you've come. Well, so Janet, tell us about what got you into policing, and what attracted you, if anything.
Well, hello. Hello. It was kind of interesting. I was raised by a single mom. I'm the baby of the group out of three, so she stopped at me because once she had me, she was done. It was perfect, right? But I had a hearing impaired grandmother that stayed at home and raised us, so mother could always work 2 and 3 jobs, to keep a roof over our head and keep food on the table. So when it came time to graduate high school, I had a chance to go to college on some athletic scholarships and different things, but I knew it would still take money from mom, and she didn't have it. So I started looking at the military and trying to find a way to finance my education on my own. So as I leave and I come to Atlanta, of all places, for MEPS to go through all that, and you go through the career orientation things, I was very interested in computers and different stuff. Mother thought I was going to get into the computer field. Well, when they showed the military police, I was hooked. And I was always very fortunate. I always say I'm a product of community policing because I knew police officers all my life. The police officers had families, and they grew up in the community, and they knew my home situation. I can actually say I have been spanked by a police officer because they knew. And they would take me home. They knew mother was working, and I had a hearing impaired grandmother that was mute at home, and they would spank me and put me in the house and say, "Don't come back out," and do these sorts of things. So they made a definite impression upon me as a young child. And so it always kind of resonated with me because, you know, they were out there taking care of us and looking over, and that was the way things used to be. You know, they walked the beats and did those things. So when I saw the military police, it kind of connected with me. So I came home and told mother, I was like, "I'm going to be an MP." She was like, "What?" And she was like, "I thought you were going to go into computers." I was like, "Well, I did too, but I'm not." So then that's how I kind of got into the military police. So then it was kind of natural when I got out of the Army that it was a natural transition. So when I came home, and it was interesting, I came home to Cedartown, I called the local police chief. I said, "Are you hiring?" I didn't tell him who I was. He said, "No." I was like, "Okay." Well, then Rome PD was hiring, so I went there and became a police officer there. And it was always so fulfilling to me because I do believe in service. And that's what it's all about, making an impact. And over the course of my 40-year career, I know truly that I have made an impact on some lives. I've been to houses where there's been devastation, there's been travesty, there's been a fatality, and you know, I'd always try to reach out if there were kids there and take them a meal after it was over with. And then I've seen these kids 15 and 20 years later, and they've let me know what it meant to them. So what we do has purpose. And a lot of people don't realize a lot of the things we do behind the scenes for the community because all they see is what's in the media. And we all know, don't believe everything you see in the media, you know, about any profession. You know, getting to know people. And that's, you know, Ann said, "I don't mind if you know my name is Janet." You know, I do that at every public talk. I said, "I don't care if you know my name is Janet Lehman. That's what it says on my birth certificate." And Mama reminds me every time we have a conversation that I am not the chief of her. So, you know, and that's kind of how it went, and I've just believed in service ever since then, and it's worked well for me. And like I said, it's been a nice ride for 40 years. I've earned every one of these gray hairs. I quit coloring it years ago. I just said, go with it. But I really enjoy this profession. It's still one of the most noble professions that's out there, even everything that's gone through, that we've gone through. But we are here to serve.
And we are glad you are.
So good.
Yes. So, Anya, tell us about your journey into aviation and what attracted you, because you know, you started pretty young. So, what got you into it?
Well, first, you already kind of know that story, but first of all, I want to say thank you for having me here. I'm actually very pleased and privileged to be in front of such amazing people in this room. But what started me flying, one was the love of travel. Anybody else like traveling in here? Oh yeah. So for me, it was travel. I just always loved to travel. My mom would just grab me and we would go somewhere. And as long as we were at the airport, I was happy. And I used to be an unaccompanied minor going to see my grandmother in Philadelphia. And so that was really my first introduction of feeling like, you know, I was grown, right? I was going to another state by myself, and my grandmother was going to meet me on the other side. One of the great things that I remembered was just the crew. It was the pilots, it was the flight attendants. They always let me sit in the flight deck. I was able to talk to the flight attendants, understand their roles and positions. And I told my mom at a very young age, I didn't know any better, all of this though, but I told her I want to go to college, I want to be a flight attendant. Don't know how that made sense at all in my little 6-year-old brain. But one thing about moms, they don't forget, right? And so leading into, I want to say I was about 13 or 14, my mom met a new friend, and he had a private plane, like a little small plane, and he was a pilot. Well, one day we were coming back from, I don't remember where, but we were all together and we landed, and there was this event happening at this airport. My mom was like, what's going on over there? And I'm right wiping the crust out of my eyes. I'm not thinking anything about what's happening on the airfield. And she happened to see all these people of color outside at a private airport. Now, as a young girl being raised in Atlanta and in Marietta, I didn't really notice that being a big difference. But my mom did. And she says, we have to figure out what's going on. Because there is no way there's so many people that look like me out here on an airfield at a private airport. Like, what is happening? So we go over there and come to find out it was Ace, and they were having their open house. And so I think the ride for a Discovery flight was like $15. And she was like, "Do you want to go fly?" I was like, "We just got out of a plane. Why do I want to go back in a plane? I don't understand." And she's like, "No, you get to fly the plane." And I was like, "Oh, I guess, you're a teenager. You don't really want to. I'm kicking my feet, probably." I think it was pretty early in the morning, but she put me in that plane. She said, "You're going to go fly." So I went, and I just remember I was up there, and I was like, he told me to turn left, turn right. The greatest part for me was the connection between what I was doing and what the plane was doing. And then you got to look down, and it's like, wait a second. I'm actually turning left and turning right. The plane is following what I'm telling it to do. This is pretty cool. So I think it was only about a 20-minute flight, got back down on the ground. My mom was like, "How was it?" I was like, teenager. I'm like, "No, it was fine." Didn't tell her really anything or how excited I was. But the entire ride home, I couldn't help but think about, I was up there, like moving a piece of metal. It's like a small little thing in the sky. And that's really what we say got the bug that bit me. It was just the thought of having that kind of freedom and that kind of control, and which is something you don't really have as a teenager, right? So it was a very great outlet for me. And then my mom said, "Well, I'm putting you in this program anyway because I need you to learn how to talk to boys. And if you're going to talk to boys, it might as well be smart boys." And I was like, "Okay, well, I guess that makes sense." And so, lo and behold, back then I was actually really shy. Obviously, I'm not now, right? But back then I was really shy, so that was her tactic. And here I am now, years and years later, after college and everything else. That love of flying is still here. The appreciation I have for people that appreciate what I've done and my facets, I was not worried about any of that. I wasn't thinking like, "Oh, I'll be the first to do this. I was just going to school. I was learning to fly, and all of these things came to me. I remember when I told my mom I got captain at Delta. It was an accident, actually. I didn't mean to do it on purpose, but I was well prepared for it. And I say that because we have this thing where you bid, right? You put in to become a captain. The way the industry was at the time, it should have taken me about 5 or 6 years to be awarded captain. So I put the bid in. I was like, "Oh, it'll be 5, 6 years down the line." Who knew it would be a month later? Wow. And so that's why I said sometimes things are, written for you that you didn't necessarily intend to. I didn't intend to be in this seat in front of you, all of you today, but this is where I am, and I'm very happy for it. So it comes with other things.
And that's why I said the famous mom. The wind beneath your wings,
Absolutely.
as the song says.
Yes.
Well, so I was thinking the other day, if I were a man in a dominant male field and role, how would I feel if all of a sudden women were entering my field, were taking my role, and so on? And so I want to be careful. We don't want to ever think of our male counterparts as being any less than wonderful. However, I'm just curious if, I think at the very least, Janet, I want to ask you this, at the very least you might have encountered curiosity as a woman in your role as a police chief, and maybe even some resistance. Can you speak to, and then from the outside looking in, the police force seems like a boys' club, oftentimes. So did you encounter any kind of resistance, or if you did, what kind of support did you lean into?
I have to be really careful because I heard there's a lot of HR people in the room. And sometimes I like to just talk blunt and, do whatever. I've been doing this long enough, I've seen a lot of the evolution. Like in the late 70s, the first females started coming into law enforcement. And when they first came in, the guys were kind of like, "Oh, we'll take care of them." So when they went on calls for service, they would have 2 or 3 male officers as a backup. Or they got put into roles like juvenile officer, crime prevention, those types of roles. So then I'm like the second generation, I like to say, that came into. So then the men at that time had kind of moved in and developed a mindset of, if you want to be like us, then you're going to have to do it on your own. So a lot of times you didn't get back up. and you went and did things on your own. And it did kind of create that you have to work twice as hard, be twice as good to be considered half as good. And it was that mentality. And some of the worst things we had to do, in nursing, my Emory folks over here, nursing is about worse than this than law enforcement, that women were eating their own. Instead of trying to straighten that crown up, when it got a little sideways, they wanted to knock it off your head because it was like, well, what are you doing coming in here trying to act like you're just as good? So you had those barriers as well. And you didn't have women's support groups like this that you could talk to and have those type of mentorships. So my mentors were actually male. So you roosters in the room, I appreciate y'all. Being a hen, I appreciate my roosters. I had a couple of men that took me under their wing that saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, and they nurtured me and grew and poured into me, even when I didn't understand what they were doing. And it meant the world to me. And then as I progressed through, now in law enforcement, we're better. We have support groups for women. We have the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, and we're trying to do these different things. But, you know, it took the men a little while to come around. I'll be completely honest. It was their ball field for a long time. When I started, they didn't make women's uniforms. God forbid when body armor came out. They asked me my cup size, and I don't know why, because they obviously did not know what a cup size in a bra was. That thing came out of the box, and it was just as flat as it could be. Wow. So we have come a long, long way as far as equipment and different things, and trying to do things better. But, you know, I've really appreciated the men in my life that were mentors, and it's kind of come full circle. It's kind of funny, I was reflecting on this with my mother. I said, you know, I had my male mentors, and now a lot of them are retiring. And I've moved into that role, and I've had to understand now that I'm the mentor, and I actually mentor more men than I do women these days. So I've kind of developed that relationship through competency and just whatever, and, you know, and just letting them know that, yes, we can do this job. You know, everything we do is not a fight. Everything we do is not physical, and it's come around. So it's been very rewarding, but it is a little odd for me to be sitting in the other chair saying, oh, I'm kind of the mentor now. That's kind of weird. Yeah. Then I look in the mirror and go, oh God, I do have all that gray hair. But yeah, so it's been an evolution, if you will.
It seems to me like Mama raised you right, in that she gave you a strength that, or your grandmother, whoever, maybe it was the policeman that spanked you, gave you that strength to be able to withstand that pressure to do twice as much, to be half as good.
Now, Mother always taught me that I could do anything I wanted to in this world as long as I was willing to put in the effort and the work. If I wasn't willing to put in the effort and the work, don't complain about not having a seat at the table. And that's what I tell women all the time. I said, you know, you may not want to go to college and get this. I said, but if you want to be a police chief, you need to look at what those prerequisites say. If it says college education, check. If it says go get this leadership program, check. And if you don't hit all these check boxes, you're not going to get a seat at the table. So a lot of the women I mentor, they'll call and say, oh, chief, I didn't get this promotion because I'm a female. First thing I do is say, send me the requirements. And we'll talk about it, and we'll go through. And 9 times out of 10, they're not meeting all their check boxes. And I'm like, you can't get a seat at the table until you meet your check boxes. And start doing those things. Quit saying you didn't get it because you're female. You didn't get it because you haven't met the requirements. And that's a big difference, you know. And so those sorts of things. So you have to put in the effort. You have to put in the work. So yes, when I was told by the major at Rome PD, women don't ride motorcycles, quite frankly, it pissed me off. And I said, hold my beer. The first female motor officer at Rome. You know? And to this day, I'm still the only female at Rome that's there. And now at Peachtree City, I got a female officer that rides a motorcycle. And I'm very proud of that.
Yay, yay. Well, many of you know my corporate career was at Delta Airlines, so I had to bring up this example. Anya, I remember there was a captain that once described the cockpit as the last bastion of male solitude. And so then here comes Anya. What has your experience been like entering into the captain's world?
It's been interesting. It's the best way to describe it, right? Interesting. But no, someone asked me the other day, she's upgrading to captain. She's like, well, I've been a first officer. I don't know if I'm ready to experience certain things. I even had, this is the third black captain, female black captain at Delta. She messaged me on Facebook and she's like, hey, I'm thinking of upgrading. What do you think? And I'm like, if you don't go in there and put that bid in and stop playing. And she had been at Delta a lot longer than I had. So I was very interested on why she was questioning herself, right? And one of the things I will say having the captain position does, it empowers me to be me. When I was in the right seat, I had to, kind of tailor myself. We call it a chameleon seat, right? Every captain is different. You have to figure out how they run the show, what their prerogative is going to be, what is most important to them, and you kind of just sit there and kind of wait. Now, when I was just the first officer, I was a great chameleon. I was like, oh, this is great. Get to kick my feet up. I'm chilling. I'll just wait till they tell me what they need me to do. But as a captain, I'm able to decide what my day is going to look like every day. I'm able to decide that this is going to be a great trip. I'm able to decide, hey, I'm going to come in with all the energy for my flight attendants today. And I also say it comes with a sense of responsibility that you can't have a bad day. I can't go to work in, a bad mood. I remember that, all of you are very familiar with the publicity that's been happening with some of the accidents recently. Can't speak too much about that, but I will tell you about my personal experience of not being in the right headspace. And I called out for a mental day. Because if I can't show up and know that I'm not going to be 100% present or represent the company in the best way, then it's best that I'm not there, right?
So I'm hearing then that you have defined your way in which you are fulfilling the role of captain, and you do it every day.
Absolutely.
And so any resistance that you receive
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Non-matter. Okay.
To me, if someone has a problem with my role or how I am or who I am, especially if it's someone I'm working with, I'm just like, oh, let's close the door for a second. Let's have a conversation. And a lot of times it's interesting because I find out it's more about how old they think I am. More than it is about like my actual role, and I've actually had people say that specifically to me. But I think that when you lean in a feminine but confident way, and you address it right on, I don't go around in circles about it. If I feel like someone's giving me pushback or having any kind of situation or issue with me being in that seat, I ask them, do you think we're going to be able to fly together on this trip today? Because I just want to make sure the roles are clear. PIC is pilot in command, right? So PIC, I appreciate everything you have to tell me, and I want you to tell me, but the decision at the end of the day is mine. So is that going to be okay for the rest of this trip? And I give them the option, otherwise we can get out. Like, I don't have anything else to say. But Delta, as you know, very much empowers us to do that, because at the end of the day, it's just me and that one other person up there, and safety is paramount. So if we can't have a conversation and make the best decisions when it is time critical, then we should not be working together.
Yeah, and so being a woman, being a young woman, being a black young woman should make no difference.
Absolutely not.
Right.
More than qualified.
Very good.
Overqualified. No kidding.
Well, so Beth, we're seeing a lot more women on construction sites these days. But how did you manage and growing up in the industry? And what do you tell young women who may be entering the construction industry, who are on the job sites, and how to manage what could be curiosity versus, or even worse than that?
Yeah, the construction industry is interesting. I use that word a lot too. And it's interesting in that, on any given job site, we'll have 1,000 workers coming together every day, and most of them all work for different companies, right? So you're combining value systems and cultures from different companies in addition to pulling together craft workers. And unfortunately, like even, in the climate that we're in today with immigration, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of things that we have to do to kind of de-escalate issues among the workforce. And, the perception of construction sites and the catcalling and just this sort of, bro culture, it's real. That is certainly something that as we've got younger women coming into the industry, which is awesome, that want to be in field supervision, they have a harder journey than I did. Most of my time was spent in an office experience. And so it's, you've got to, again, kind of recognize that you are blending lots of different people who come from many, many different backgrounds who are doing physical labor. They're hot, they're tired, tensions rise, and how do you continue to de-escalate that? So I'm learning a lot from you today, by the way. Like, we have a lot in common. We all do. And, so for me personally, I always, I've just always been a person who's never strived to be the smartest person in the room. I just strive to find the best ideas, always. And as I was coming up through the industry, I spent a lot of time learning from our field supervision because they were out there putting the building together, they were working with all the different trades. When you're in construction, you really truly are just managing the work, and every building that, the one that we're sitting in was put together by hands of somebody supervising that labor to get it done, and people don't think about that. And so I went to the source of who must be the most knowledgeable to really understand the best way to go do that. And so I just developed those relationships. So it is kind of hard to say, there's any secret formula. I think the construction industry workforce challenges are no different than other industries. We have workforce challenges in aviation, in law enforcement, in construction, in healthcare, but we're highly underrepresented by a significant part of our population, and that's women. Most of the workforce challenges to get women into the industry, though, aren't the obvious. Not the the conditions on the workforce on the job site. It's things like childcare. We were talking about this at breakfast, right? Job sites. In Phoenix, Arizona, right now, the job sites start at 4 a.m. because it's hot, and you can't work past 11. I was just literally in Phoenix this week, and it was 115 degrees, and they're like, let's go to the roof. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And I was on the roof for about 5 minutes, but people work up there for hours, right? So childcare options are really limited. And so you've got that. You've got the reality of just some of the basic, kind of support system needs to make that a viable career choice for a lot of workforce. So I don't think that's a unique, to the construction industry. It's for sure one of the reasons why it's so hard to attract talent into our workforce. And, it's something that I think at a community scale, we've got to really figure out how can we provide, quality childcare, how can we provide quality support services for our general workforce.
And I would think women like you that grew up in the industry, to achieve the credibility they need to supervise a field workforce, would need to be able to get their hands dirty, right, alongside others, just like in the police or in the aviation world. So that's got to be tough. You've got to be able to work alongside the people that you're going to be supervising and to achieve that credibility. So, wow, that's tough. That's got to be tough to attract women into it. I can see that. I'm going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. About 80% of all professionals experience at some point in time, men and women, this sense of being found out, as not being as good as they profess to be. So I'm curious then, especially it's also especially very dominant in people that are in minority roles, or minorities in their roles. So I'm curious if, and I wanted to begin with Anya, if you ever got caught up, and I don't think so, because I'm just thinking that you're pretty confident, but did you ever feel a sense of imposter syndrome where you felt like you had to work harder to be able to fend off any perceptions of being less than your male counterparts?
Amazing question. You should ask my mom. No. Absolutely. Absolutely. I deal with it still every day. And to me, me being honest about that, at least hopefully, can allow other people to say, hey, when I have that little thought, just remembering, you know, it's okay. I've gotten better about understanding 100% who I am. And I think it's a little bit of growing up too, you know. I say growing up, I'm grown. I am grown. I'll be 34 next week. I'm so excited. I told my sister the other day, I said, I'm at the age where young people think I'm old and older people are like, oh, you're still so young.
Yeah.
So, but with that being said, imposter syndrome definitely is a thing. And the interesting thing is, other people in my age group, they look at, I'll say my success, right? They're in different industries. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so cool that you're, 34 and a captain. I started when I was 14. I've been flying airplanes for 20 years. I'm celebrating 10 years of being an airline pilot within the next few weeks. Like, I am a professional in my field. I have history, I have experiences. I've flown for over 10 companies. I've flown, 20 different aircraft. I've done a million check rides. Well, not literally a million. Probably about, I think I counted one time and it was like 35 to 40 check rides. Check rides are where essentially you get your license taken, right? They're checking to make sure that you are equipped to fly that aircraft, whichever one you're getting checked out on, or to have your license. So with that being said, imposter syndrome does seep in, and one of the things that I tell my mentees all the time, especially the ones that are going into training, because they're like, oh, I've never seen these buttons before, this is a lot of stuff. And that's when it creeped in the most for me, was always learning a new airplane. Very similar to you, you're like, I didn't like Legos, I didn't like airplanes, so I was like, what is an airplane? What's an engine? I don't know these things. With that being said, I always tell them, take a little bit at a time. And then on top of that, they're just like, well, everybody else seems like they're not struggling. I'm like, they're struggling. They're just not telling you. A lot of people in that same room are having the same questions of doubt. They're having the same issues. I'm like, just speak up about it. I don't care if you're in the middle of a classroom. I don't care if you pull your instructor aside. Do whatever you need to do to feel like you're capable every single day you go to work. I don't care if that's pulling the book apart, figuring out. I was like, you got YouTube nowadays. You have all these things available to you to feel more confident in your field. There's so many ways for education, and for me to overcome imposter syndrome has always been to become more educated in what I'm confused about. Even when I have a first officer, for example, they might, and I don't mind questions. When I said what I said earlier was just more about like, oh, we should do this. I'm like, no, hold on. But if they ask me a question like, oh, I thought it was this way, or I'm pretty sure that the procedure said to do it this way, I'm like, you know what? Let me just pull over my iPad and just double check. That's okay too. And a lot of times I feel like there are people that feel like they need to puff out their chest to show that they don't have imposter syndrome, when sometimes it's okay to step back and say, hey, I might not know that. That's confidence within itself, to be able to look it up, to be able to find more information out. And to me, that confidence trumps that imposter syndrome every time.
Yeah, and we're glad you're not making it up in the moment.
No, I never make it up.
No, but you brought out a really valuable point, and that is that you uncovered all the evidence by thinking through all of the training, all the years of flying airplanes, the numbers of airplanes. That's the evidence that you have that you can bring to your mind when you start having those self-doubts.
Right, and I'm sure in other careers as well, it's so interesting how randomly, one of my friends was like, how did you know that? And I said, honestly, that was back when I was about 18. This one thing happened to me. And you pull out this random piece of information that you don't even realize that you learned so back when from all your experiences. So.
Yeah. So Beth, what about you? Have you ever had that experience?
Sure, yeah. No, I probably a little bit earlier in my career had it more than I do now. I think it's interesting. I absolutely 100% never had it on my list of things to do to be the CEO. And I became the CEO not because of a desire. I became the CEO because of a need for the company and my willingness to serve in it. And it's certainly a very, very hard position. I have a lot of responsibility. We're an $8 billion company. We have projects all over the country, and they're really complicated. And I walk them, and I have no idea half the time what's even inside of them, right? It's just, I have to depend on an incredible team of talented experts and my job is to make sure that they have absolutely everything that they need. And, you know, where there's no CEO school, I know there's a lot of executive coaches in the room, and a lot of it is experience, and a lot of it is just being able to make decisions. And, you know, I have learned in this position, I know a lot less than I thought that I did in life, because, you know, every single day there's something that I go, well, that's a first. And I just have to be prepared to make the decision. And, you know, again, in the construction industry, we have a whole lot of employee relations issues. It's just a weird business. So anyway, it's, you know, what I've noticed though, I find it interesting, a lot of, you know, and certainly our women's network within Holder, other groups that I've been a participant with, there was sort of this perception when the book came out about the confidence code, that women had a higher, you know, imposter syndrome than men. And that has not been my experience. And I think that my experience working with all male leaders above me for most of my career is that I think that what's dangerous with imposter syndrome is when you don't have the courage to say, ooh, I'm feeling kind of funny right now and I don't know the answer to that. And it comes out as hubris. And people go to the other extreme and they try to be overconfident and they try to become arrogant. And that can be just a really dangerous leadership style. And I've witnessed some pretty amazing people fail in their careers because they got, they just couldn't admit, I don't know. It's a very simple thing to say, I don't know. So, you know, I think that it's definitely just a human thing. It's not male or female. I think it's important that people realize that in each new step of your life journey and your career mapping, you're going to hit new challenges, and there's not a leadership book or some training class that you can take that can prepare you for most of those situations. And, you know, the best leaders tend to be the most curious leaders, or open-minded to hearing perspectives, so that they can make good judgment and balanced decisions and be prepared for the things that are just, I mean, I heard the quote recently, and it's not a unique quote, you know, the most certainty in the world right now is that there's uncertainty. That's just what we can just depend on every single day, that we just are gonna have something uncertain that we could not predict, and just be prepared that, you know, for me, I like to focus on having the resilience to be able to handle those uncertainties. And the last thing I'll say though, one thing I really learned very recently, probably in the last 5 years, about men. So sorry for the men in the room, but you guys might laugh at this. I had this belief system just based on how people present themselves that all men were good at golf. And then I started playing golf. And I'm like, well, they are not. And, you know, in my world, I call it superintendent golf. And so if you're a superintendent in the construction industry, you're the person out there running the labor. And if you're really good at golf, you're probably not really good at your day job. And I call it superintendent golf because a gimme is from like here to, you know, that middle table over there, which I'm like, that's my kind of golf, because I'm not good at golf either. And so, you know, there's just funny like life things like that I'm like, oh, this kind of experience is a little bit tied to imposter syndrome.
That is great. That is great. You know, and it's so refreshing to hear from a CEO who has said, I'm not fully baked. There's still more to be learned. And so kudos to you for that. So Janet, what do you think? Have you ever experienced that? You did talk about having to work twice as hard to be half as good and so on, which is one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome, but did you ever experience it?
Well, I've heard doubt, and I've heard courage. Obviously, we're all going to have doubts, but having the courage to work through those doubts and to still believe in yourself is what's important. And yeah, we've all had that. It's just working through it. You know, I have an officer advisory board at Peachtree City Police Department because even at 40 years, I still learn something new every day. I have never had the same day twice, and that's why I love this job. I could not work in a factory and put widgets together. I would go crazy. That's just not me. But, you know, it's...
So you're still growing and you're still learning.
I'm still growing and learning, and we do a lot of training in the police department because we have a very dangerous job.
Yeah.
And I never really grasped why we spend so much money on training. We send people off to all this high-speed, low-drag stuff. They come back to the agency, they are so ready to go, and they want to tell you all about this training and what they've learned, and the chief says, we don't do that here. Why the heck do you send them? You know, so when they come back, I want to hear those new things. When I started 40 years ago, they gave me a gun, a badge, and a gun belt, and press down hard, you're making 5 copies. We wrote everything by hand. Now you look inside that police vehicle, you can almost launch a NASCAR or a NASA lunar module. There's so many computers in there. They got tasers, they got ASP, they got OC. We have to give them outer vests because we're blowing everybody's backs out. They've got so much of this. It's totally different, you know, and it's okay because I can tell that young officer, I never had to deal with that. I've been tased. I don't carry one, but I've been tased because I always tell them, I'm not going to ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do myself first. So I was the first one at Swanee PD that got tased even though I didn't carry one. But, you know, so you have to do those things. We've heard a lot about, you know, sometimes, and I did a talk for some nurses at Piedmont Fayette, and they were in there, and it was talking about males coming into the female role. And it is different. Because I had to ask some of the males in there, I said, when you walk in the room, how many times is it assumed you're the doctor? Because you're the male. Female nurses didn't have to do that. They come into the room and they can be the doctor and they get looked at like they're the nurse. So it is vastly different. And that's things we've had to learn and we've had to navigate. And yes, it's easier for the male nurses because there's already the assumption. They're the male in the room. They got to be in charge. I can go in somewhere with an officer. I've done that before. I got 2 stars on my shoulder. It even says chief on my name tag. And they'll look at me and say officer, and they'll assume the chief is the male. I'm like, no, sorry. I was in a Harley-Davidson dealership. I was ready to buy me a brand new Ultra Classic. I was a deputy chief at Swanee at the time. My chief was with me. He had 2 stars on. I had 1 star. So obviously that meant I must have been somebody in somebody's mind. So the little sales guy comes out there, he totally blows me off, and he's talking to Chief. Chief's like, what do you need to talk to? He goes, yeah, officer, can I help you? I was like, no, you can't. And I went to Florida and bought my motorcycle. So, you know, it's just those assumptions, and, you know, we've had to work through them. And, you know, I've had to do it so much in my career that now it's almost a joke with me when it happens. I just kind of laugh it off, and it was like, oh, bless your heart. Just bless your heart. And just move on.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, Beth, I wanted to talk to you a bit about an amazing figure that I learned. Holder Construction reported $7.7 billion in revenue in 2024, up from $5 billion the previous year. What a huge jump. So how did Holder achieve such a tremendous revenue growth, and what kinds of leadership skills and abilities did it take to achieve that?
I have to tell a funny story though to build on what you just said. I get asked all the time, if I'm copied on an email, usually it happens like with community people with Tommy Holder, people, they just assume I'm his administrative assistant. It happens all the time, and I just say, bless your heart. And the best part is when Tommy corrects them, I'm like, and then they're like, oh, okay, sorry. You know, anyway, it's just part of the job, I suppose. So for us, we really don't set growth goals based on let's go, you know, increase our revenue, let's go increase our profits. We really focus on being the very best at the select projects that we go build. And that revenue growth was really driven mostly because 60% of our work is in data centers. And that, it's kind of interesting. Our first data center, there's not anybody from UPS in the room, but we back in, you know, the early, in fact, it was the first job site I ever walked as an intern, was the UPS data center here in Georgia, so 30 years ago. And we've just been part of that market for a very long time, and it is transforming faster than I've ever seen it transform. And there's a lot of, you know, controversy around data centers right now, and you know, the one thing I'll just say, if you want to get rid of data centers, if you're kind of on that campaign, get rid of all your technology for a day, and you will realize how addicted we all are. I mean, everything, our cars, our everything. You know, airplanes are probably run by technology today, right? Everything. The cloud, right? And so, so it is interesting. I mean, in this space, you know, I'll just give a quick statistic again for why the revenue went up, and then I'll answer the question of what am I doing as a leader. You know, a data center for American Express that we're building in Phoenix, where your credit card transactions will go and all the great security they provide, is 13 megawatts. A data center to run machine learning for Gemini, which is Google's product, is 200 megawatts. So machine learning and supporting AI, which will transform healthcare, transform law enforcement, transform every industry that we're in. I mean, the camera technology alone for law enforcement is just, it's incredible, and I hope that it's helping you all do a lot of what you do and get to solution faster. But those facilities take a tremendous amount of power. So they're also a lot more expensive. And so most of our revenue growth was really just driven by the scale of projects. We actually are building less projects for the revenue of $3 billion growth. It's just the size and scale and the complexity of it. What has changed is that we've also had to really make, we have a leadership development imperative. Like, I have to make sure I have people who have the skill sets to go deliver these really highly complicated facilities. And, you know, this market is, as the #1 data center builder, a lot of our competitors want our people. And so how do you retain and attract talent, but also make sure that we are developing leaders who can handle working with experts and working with a lot, you know, probably more experienced people. And that's new. I mean, our traditional path has been you graduate from college, you come to Holder, spend a significant amount of your career there. But if you're 15 years into your career right now and you're leading people who have, you know, 30 years of technical experience, it's just different. And our job sites used to maybe have 20 people, you know, kind of on the Holder side managing all the work. Now they have 70 people because these facilities just have that much technical expertise on them. So it's just changed the dynamic of what we expect of our leaders, and then also making sure that they really have kind of more advanced skills and leading differently. And that's been a big focus.
Yeah. So in the face of tariffs on aluminum, steel, supply chain disruptions perhaps, staffing, how will you sustain this growth, or what's the plan? How will you manage?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we manage based on our backlog. Our backlog into 2026 is stronger than 25 and stronger than 24 because of mostly the data centers. We're also big into the aviation space. We built the Salt Lake City airport. Super cool. I know you like it. It's a really cool airport. And we're doing Burbank too. Yeah, we do a lot of big airports. But, you know, so we're really, really wise about making sure we have a healthy pipeline of projects. And we really can only look out 24 months. Right now, things are great. I'm grateful that we're not in some of the markets that are more sensitive to lending, like multifamily apartments, things like that. They're very sensitive to what the interest rates are, and then the cost of construction goes up and their pro forma doesn't work. For the data center market, for the most part, it's so business critical for these companies that they're going to absorb the increases in the costs. You know, and so it's the tariffs, it's so unpredictable. I mean, it just, you know, it's like pick a day. Are they on, they off? We don't know. And, you know, until the materials cross the border, you don't really get hit with the increase in the cost. But we've certainly been put on notice. Probably nothing substantial like what we hit with COVID, because that was, you know, 30-40% increase in construction costs just because of the supply chain disruptions. Right now, it's, you know, kind of teetering around 10 to 15%. It is actually worse though coming from domestic producers where they're increasing their costs because they can. And so it's not like you're really saving because you're bringing stuff internal. So it's, you just got to take it day by day.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must have a team that's on top of that every single moment because things are changing so quickly. All right, so Janet, I read an article about you that said this. It's a good one. It's a good one. It's a good one. A true servant leader, Chief Moon believes in mentorship, community engagement, and developing future leaders. She said in this article, it's not about me, it's about others. It's about growing and developing others around me so that perhaps they'll take my place someday. She instills in her officers the power of small acts of kindness, knowing they can leave positive, lasting impressions. And you heard us talk a little bit earlier about leadership character. To us, that is true character. So who or what shaped you to value servant leadership? Where did that come from?
Well, it was interesting because when I started, law enforcement's a lot of paramilitary, and I was military, so I was used to that authoritative style, do as I say, don't ask me any questions, just jump when I say jump, ask me how high I want you to jump. So as I promoted to sergeant, that was kind of the way naturally you assimilated into. And it was like, when I was an officer, I didn't like being treated that way. So why am I as a supervisor treating other people that way? And then in the mid-90s, I went to my first John Maxwell seminar. Are y'all familiar with John Maxwell? I'm a huge John Maxwell fan. And that's the first time I ever heard the concept of servant leadership, and there's a different way of doing things. And I was like, you know what, that made a whole lot of sense. And I started transforming and reading more about, John Maxwell and really getting into transformation leadership, in which a lot of the guys like to call it transformation leadership because they don't want to call it servant leadership. Because, because they're guys. But that's okay. They can call it transformation, just change, And then I started realizing on my teams they were excelling, morale picked up, and people were happy to come into work and do those sorts of things. And then I was like, wow, this really works. And I just embraced that model and just poured into it, and it's really worked for me throughout my career. And I've tried to embrace that with the supervisors and even the officers that are out there. I'm like, look, we're all human beings. You never know when you come across someone what they're dealing with. Even during COVID, when wear a mask, don't mask. I'd get complaints. Chief, your officer didn't have a mask on when they came. I was like, they were 20 feet away from you. But I was like, but you know what? If somebody asks you to put a mask on, be kind. Put a mask on. You don't know if they're going through chemotherapy. You don't know what their life is. Just be kind. It doesn't cost us anything to be kind. And I will kill you with kindness until you won't let me. Now, if you won't let me, I can flip that B switch in about half a second. But I always want to be kind because I understand, and I've seen people at their worst, and I've seen people at their best, and sometimes people just need that kindness. That's what they're looking for, and we are here to provide a service, and that's what I try to tell the officers. I said, just be kind. You don't know when the last time this person may have eaten a meal. You don't know these sorts of things. And it doesn't cost you a thing to be kind. And it works. So I think my fundamental role is the growth and development of my people. If I'm not preparing them to take my place, then I'm not doing my job. And then we are in a unique place in Peachtree City. And my Peachtree City residents here can attest to that. It's a wonderful place. We have a high quality of life. We have a low crime rate. Police chiefs all over the country would die for my crime rate. The worst thing I have is in the larceny category. If it wasn't for shoplifting, entering autos, and theft, I wouldn't hardly have any crime in Peachtree City. If I could get rid of Walmart, Home Depot, and Victoria's Secret. And we have over 110 miles of multi-use path and 12,000 registered golf carts that run around my city. Which brings its own different set of dynamics. All by itself. So, there's things that are going on. So I want people to understand that it takes a special officer to work in Peachtree City. They have to be able to communicate. They have to be able to relate because our citizens demand it. And you know what? They're our boss. They do pay our salary. And sometimes telling young officers, yeah, they are your boss. You think I'm your boss? No, they're the ones that's paying your salary. Not me. They pay. Be nice to them. And I'm going to tell you a little secret about quotas. Everybody wants to talk about quotas. Oh, it's the end of the month. There's the tax revenue generators on the side of the road. I'll tell you the secret. There is no quotas. They're free to write as many tickets as they want. But in Peachtree City, 63% of the time, you're getting a warning. A warning.
That's good to know.
So I like to share that because people, oh yeah, you gotta do that. Only 2% of my $13 million budgets were fine and forfeitures, and by law I can have up to 40%. But 63% of the time in Peachtree City last year, when you saw somebody on the side of the road with blue lights, they got a warning. I just had to put that plug out.
And you know what? This is a great lesson in leadership and developing the culture. You have truly, as a Peachtree City resident, I can say this with all truth, and that is that you have set a culture there that is so evident. When Janet came in, she said about community policing, and so we, in our little neighborhood, we had our own police officer that came and attended all of our parties with his wife, and would come to our association meetings and give us little talks about what's going on, and so on. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful culture that you've established, so thank you for that. So Anya, you're responsible, and listen to this folks, for operating a $100 million factory each time she goes to work. Think about this, the aircraft, a $100 million factory producing 189 seats, that is the product, each in each flight, generating an average of $150,000 in revenue every day, while leading a team of 6 employees every single day she reports to work. Now that's a lot of responsibility. And you are, as we've already established, very young. So how do you establish your leadership presence at the beginning of each flight? Sometimes we see the captains out in the gatehouse, talking to customers sometimes, so how do you establish your leadership presence?
It's a very great question because I don't think I've ever thought of it. One thing is for sure, like you said or a little bit earlier, every day is different. Every flight is different. Every crew is different. So even though I'll have the same first officer for 4 days, but every flight I might have different flight attendants, right? And it depends on, are we late? Are we on time? Is everything running the way it's supposed to? So for me, I'd say, just like you were saying actually, I always lead with kindness. I have no idea. One of the great things about being a passenger pilot, I say passenger pilot because there's cargo pilots out there, is that I get to touch basically so many people's lives, even if it's for a second that they see me. They're relying on me just as much as I'm relying on myself to get from point A to point B safely, right? And whether that's for vacation, whether it's for a funeral, whether it's for a graduation, whether it's for seeing someone have a baby or whatever else. Everybody is traveling for a different reason. Sometimes we're transporting someone's loved one in the bottom of the aircraft. There's always something going on. So for me, I always lead with kindness with my crew. And till otherwise deemed necessary. She said it. One of the things that I love is I'm realizing that first of all, who I am, it reigns across the entire nation because I'm very noticeable and recognizable at Delta. I'm the only black female captain on my aircraft in Atlanta, and actually on the East Coast. So you end up saying, oh, I flew with the black girl on the 7-3. It's like, oh, Anya. So it's real easy to know who I am, right? So it's probably best that I have the best attitude, right? But the great part about all of that is I get to hear my name being said in such positive ways without me around. And so when you lead with kindness, I think that is a wonderful thing. If I was just like every other pilot, no one would even mention my name, which is okay too, don't get me wrong. But they would be like, oh yeah, I flew with her. And that would be the end of conversation, unless I was just, a terror, then there would be another conversation, right? But the fact that people are saying, oh my gosh, I really enjoyed flying with her. Oh my gosh, she's so considerate of our safety. Oh, the passengers, one of the things that I personally think that I do different than most, and I've gotten this compliment from the passengers themselves. I've had 3, 4, 5 hour delays. But I make the announcement and I stay in the gate area and I say, hey, if you have any questions about our delay, I'll be here. For the next 10 or 15 minutes, please come up, ask me whatever you like, but I'll have to make a few phone calls in a little bit and just get an update for you. So I try to be present. I try to be there. I try to say, hey, I don't want this either. I was supposed to be home 5 hours ago, just like you guys were. I'm trying to roll this thing on as much as I can. But I try to assure people and I try to be present and I try to be facing forward. However, one of my favorite things, really not my favorite thing, is when people are saying bye, there's always someone that's like, and I'm standing right in the middle of the door and they're like, where's the pilot? Great. Hi. Right in front of you. You're welcome. Bye-bye. But it never fails. It happens all the time. But a flight attendant will be standing there with me, a guy. They're like, thank you for the flight. And I'm like, you're welcome. Have a good day. So, it happens. And thankfully, I'm able to, 10 years later, just laugh about it, roll it off my chest, because the amount of positive responses that I get from people far outweigh the amount of people that don't recognize who I am or my position or my uniform. And the more that I stand up, the more that I say goodbye, the more that I stand in that gate, it's helping change that narrative or that bias that most people have. I mean, we all have it. I accidentally did it to someone. I was like, oh, what did the dispatcher say? What did he say? He's like, well, it's a she. And I was like, oh, my bad. What did she say? And so we do it. We find little things that we just have these biases with, but how I establish my leadership presence, to answer your question, I think is very much like the chief here, which is servant leadership. And I want to make sure that everybody feels like they can talk to me about anything. Sometimes that has backfired. I'm like, wait, this is a little bit too much information. But yeah, exactly. Or they feel a little bit too comfortable sharing I'll say their opinions about who I am. And that's where the switch kind of turns when that happens. But majority of the time, 99.2% of the time, leading with kindness has worked very well with me.
Leading with kindness, I love that. All right, so it's your turn. We want to hear from you all. What questions do you have? And Yolanda, if you'd like to come get the mic. Susan has the first question.
I was just going to ask, and you may have touched on it in some of your answers, but specifically, what's an example of a really tough situation that you had to deal with, something that you had to overcome, deal with, that was just a very difficult situation on a personal or professional level, whatever, but professional in particular?
Did you have a particular person, Susan, or is it all three of our families?
Either.
Okay, gotcha.
I can hit real quick. So I have a daughter who is now 17, and she has an extremely rare autoimmune disease that put her in the hospital for 7.5 weeks when she was 11. So this was in 2019. And I was an executive vice president at the time. And she started out with strep throat, kind of flu-like symptoms, uncontrollable vomiting, and, checked her into CHOA, just thinking I would leave that night. And we didn't leave for 7.5 weeks. And, I will say on most days, there's this sort of nagging behind the scenes going on with me on her health. And it is a full-time job to manage her health because it's just a very, very complicated disease. And for those of my friends in the healthcare industry, you can appreciate, in that period of time, I became a project manager in the hospital. I had neurologists, gastroenterologists, nurses, psychologists. Nobody could figure out what she had because it was so rare. And by the grace of God, there was a neurologist who just came to CHOA who was a neuroimmunologist who knew immediately what she had and knew how to treat her and truly saved her life because her lesions in her brain were in her brainstem and all her functions were shutting down and we almost lost her. And so it's, I always have that going on. And the empathy that it's taught me is you can look around this room and we all have something going on. And you just never know. And I have to manage all that and do all that while running an $8 billion company. And with all due respect, my male counterparts, most days I'm like, did you cook dinner last night? Right, and I don't mean to, I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but I'm not really being facetious. You know, I just like the things sometimes, like the backpack that I have to wear to get the same result is just so much greater. But I don't become a victim about it. It's just the story that I know and what I have to do on any given day to get stuff done. But it's also helped me really lean in. I'm so honored. I just got asked by Donna Highland to serve on the Children Healthcare Board. And yeah, it's awesome. And to be able to work with her to, you know, from a patient, parent, caretaker perspective, and to be an advocate for, you know, how the work that they need to do, especially in the environment that we're in today with research being taken away and Medicaid being taken away. And I mean, it is going to be a full-time job of this community to help support each other through these times on that. So we always got something going on.
Well, in my line of work, I really have leaned in here the last few years about officers' mental health and wellness. They say the average American may experience 1 or 2 traumatic events throughout their life. A police officer has 600 to 700. We are number 2 in the nation in suicide rates behind veterans. I have lost more friends to suicide in this job than I have being killed in the line of duty. So when I worked at Rome, I was the fatality investigator. So for 6.5 years, if I came to your accident scene, it was not good. Somebody died. Or it was a serious injury of some sort that they were going to be catastrophically injured for the rest of their life. So I've got my baggage. Because when I was coming up, it was a suck it up buttercup generation. You didn't talk about it, you didn't do anything about it, you went and had choir practice after work, and if you showed any emotion about it, something's wrong with you. That was so wrong. And we've done that to so many police officers throughout the years. We have finally realized we have got to quit doing that. And I had an officer that was going through command college. He needed to do his research paper. He says, Chief, what do you think I should do it on? I said, I think you should do it on officers' mental health and suicide. And he looked at me, I said, do your research on this. Do your survey and say, if you came to me and said you had ideation of suicide, what do you think would happen to your career? 90% said I would terminate them. That's wrong. I broke you, don't I have an obligation to try to help fix you? So we have really worked to try to change that if something is really bugging you, because it is not natural to see a baby die. It is not natural to go to some of these scenes and see people at the worst, and they're crying and they're beating your chest because they know no other way to get it out. And then you have to go home and embrace your baby and do those sorts of things. So we have really worked on that to try to help that, because the mental health crisis in the general population is huge. Healthcare was huge during COVID. I mean, we saw so many nurses and doctors being totally strung out and doing tremendous amounts of work. But then in law enforcement, it's always been there, because usually when it's bad, we're the ones that are there. So there's a lot of baggage that goes with that I think we're finally doing some better work. We still have a long way to go. But there's a lot that goes with it. You talk about the backpack, backpacks get heavy.
I'm like, I don't know what else to add. I'm like, my chest is heavy. You know, my career, as you all know, has a lot to do with safety. And I say all the time that things happen every day that we don't necessarily see or as public, but when it happens in aviation, it's tragic, right? And it becomes public news very fast. I have had my fair share amount of emergency situations, whether it was in a small plane, the airlines, and honestly, I feel like when I get on the ground, I am so proud of all of the training that I have been through. Because you kick into gear and you don't even realize, you're like, I did exactly what I was trained to do. Because one thing about emergencies, it does not happen every day. Our most common type of emergency is a medical emergency. So that's, you know, any kind of thing happen with a passenger in the back. But what it does is it shifts. We still have the same job to do, but now you add complexity that we're not used to every day. So it shifts it, but it also requires you to act quickly, it requires you to make decisions clearly, and it requires you to communicate very effectively and as fast as you possibly can. So with that being said, mental health is a big thing in our community as well, that you don't talk about it. So that's something that's being addressed as well. And they're doing a lot better at allowing pilots to talk about the strains and the extremist things that's on their life. I'm not a mother yet. Hopefully I will be. My mom's been waiting. But you know, the backpack that I do carry, I think, is of my community. And everyone expects you to do and be there for everybody. But one thing that I've gotten better at is being able to say, you know what, I'm turning my phone off. Like, I had a tough day. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, that's one thing I will say. Being a pilot, that is one of the best parts, is once I walk away from that airplane, I am free to do whatever I want to do, whatever hobby. I mean, granted, if I don't have to fill out paperwork, that's part of my brief. Let's not fill out paperwork on this trip. But, you know, anything that happens that's abnormal, they do ask for a report. So that's what we mean by, like, let's just have a smooth trip, no paperwork. But, you know, I'm able to close that door and walk away. But there are times that I've had very stressful events and situations that happen that I don't have anyone to really communicate or have that conversation with that understands. My mom tries her best, but she's like, well, what is that? How did you? I'm like, never mind. I love you, but never mind. So a lot of times I tend to keep it to myself just because it is just part of the job, but it is taxing and it's tiring, and people will pull on you. And I think as a woman, and I say that because my male counterparts, they'll sit there and be like, you just took 20 pictures today. I'm like, I know. Because people are going in the flight deck like, oh my gosh, I want to take a picture with you. And I'm like, I gotta run a checklist. But, you know, and but I do it proudly, but it does come with its own sense of responsibility. I have to be in a good mood. People expect me to show up for them differently because it's so few of us. But you take one person and you put 1,000 people that want them, and it's like, I have children. You know what I mean? Even though I don't. So with that being said, that's the backpack that I carry, and it becomes a matter of balance. And I am thankful I have learned to turn off my phone and be happy doing it anytime I do.
So we have time for just 2 more questions. Who would like to ask the next one? Look out, this mama.
So as I watch you all, and being in leadership, everyone in here, do we have a certain posture? As we wake up in the morning, you take a posture in your home. When you leave the home, you take on another posture. When you solve problems, there's another posture. And, you know, at the end of the day, when you can exhale, who do you have for your emotional support? As Anya mentioned, I can't help her understand the things that's in the deck, in the flight deck, but I can help her with people and what things probably meant, or what she's processing, things like that. So for both of you ladies, I'd like to know, who's your emotional support person? How do you decompress? How do you deal with it? Do you deal with it? And then what do you think you wish you had the courage to do?
Well, I live in a little community called Brooks right outside of Peachtree City. It is so small, we don't even have a red light. We just have a stop sign and a post office. And 512 people last time I looked at the sign. So I have a 25-acre farm. I have farm animals. I have horses, donkeys, cows, pigs, goats, chickens, turkeys, geese, a sheep that still lives in the house and wears pins and suspenders with releases. And everybody asks me, says, why in the world do you have that, Chief? I'm like, because when I come home, I deal with people all day long. And a lot of times they ain't too happy to be dealing with me. But when I get out of that car, every one of those animals and my dogs are happy to see me. Come feed me. So that's my stress relief, is working at the farm, doing those sorts of things. And I'm very blessed. I am married to a nurse practitioner in neurology at Emory, who's a former officer as well, served in a command position, so I have an outlet there that I didn't have. I've had it for 21 years, which has been good. Pray for me, bless my heart, my in-laws live with me. And you know, it's like a family compound, but But they're good there too, that I have that. I wish I could turn my phone off. That's one of the downsides to my job. When my phone goes off in the middle of the night, my greatest number one fear is one of my officers are hurt or killed. And I lay my head down every night worried about that. So I have a lot of balance, but I use the farm to do that. I do play some golf, not necessarily too well. Yes, superintendent golf, because that's something else I learned early in my career. I noticed all the male officers were playing golf with the command staff and the chief. And I was like, why are they doing that? They were out there getting career development. Chief, what do I need to do this for my career? I didn't realize it because I was a big softball player until I almost lost my left foot in a horseback accident. And the doctor said, you can't play softball anymore. So I started playing golf. So then I went out and played golf with them, and I was like, man, I have been missing out on all these years. So anytime I talk to women, I'm like, I don't care if you're good or not, go play golf. There's so much business being done on the golf course. So between my animals, my family, and a little bit of golf, that's kind of how I deal and decompress and just try to let it go.
I'll be super quick. Can I come hang out with you? People are gonna be like, "Where's Beth?" And she's hanging out with Chief Brooks down in Peachtree City. Are you at the police foundation? No, I'm just over there feeding her goats. Well, this is the truth. My decompression is my 2 golden doodles. Like, they are ridiculously spoiled. They're smart and dumb at the same time. My husband's like, I'm second marriage, and he's like, what is the deal with you and these dogs? I'm like, do not question this relationship. Don't. They are in charge. They're more important than you, and they were here first. And I'm not kidding. That is how it is. And they're just, I go home and I deal with people issues so much. And I just look at them and they look at me and I pet them for like 2 hours every day. So, because children, my husband, they still need stuff. And they're demanding. But the golden doodles, they're great. So that is my stress relief. They really are. I'm going to go hang out at her farm. Literally. You can give me a job. I'll be okay with it. I'll be happy.
Who wants to have the last question? Last question. I've got one right here.
So as women who have achieved, high goals in the professional careers that you've had, have you had any learnings or advice for how you balance your career and family?
I'll go super quick. My advice is to try to just stay present in today. It's super easy to imagine what it might be like when, children get to the next stage of life or whatever. And my experience has been, is the more present I've just stayed in today, one, I've enjoyed it, and two, it's usually better than what I would have predicted it to be. People, teenagers are gonna be a disaster. My kids are amazing, and I love this stage of their life, right? I thought it was harder when they were 2 and they could eat a lithium battery. It's a lot easier, And then, from a career perspective, it sort of applies to the same thing. I've had to make a lot of sacrifices in both areas. I've not always been able to commit fully because of things going on personally, and I've, absolutely made a lot of sacrifices as a mom. But I've always shown up for the things that matter to my kids as best as I can. And I've put enough money aside for their therapy, so they should be fine later on in life.
Well, obviously, being in a line of work that's 24/7, 365, I've had to spend a lot of time away from family. I've missed a lot of Christmas meals, Thanksgiving meals. Waffle House is my friend. I've eaten there a lot for the holidays. But then again, I also remember that my stepfather was in hospice and was dying. And my mother called and asked me if I could be at home. And I called and asked if I could be off work that night. I was working the night shift, and I was told, no, you're scheduled for work. And he died that night. And I made a vow then, if I ever had an opportunity not to do that to someone, I would. So I make a concerted effort at work, and I tell every employee, family first. I'm I'm like, it's your faith. I don't care what your faith is, if you profess to have one or not. So everybody believes in something. Your family, then this job. Because if 1 and 2 is in order, you're good for me when you come to work. When 1 and 2 get out of whack, that's when I got problems with you. So if you have a child that's graduating from high school, or you have a marriage or some significant life, you're going to be there. And we're going to backfill, and we're going to do whatever it takes. If I have to come work your shift for you, you need to be there for your family. If your child is playing ball in Peachtree City and you're in that zone, go watch their ball games. You got a radio. I pay good money for that portable. You'll hear the call come out. Because they need to be there to have, because we do miss out on things. And we were talking about child care earlier. I don't know why somebody hasn't gotten to the market where they have overnight child care. Especially for the nursing profession, hospital professions, and us. The kid's going to be asleep. I mean, how much work's it going to be? Well, you know, and we're getting now to where we even have more single dads. That is a factor. So, we have got to come up with some better mechanisms, either finding a better way to job share part-time in this 24/7 environment that I have to operate in, because we don't shut down from 8 to 5 and off on holidays. That WIL keeps going, and we have to have the staffing. So we need some way to start taking care of the kids. During COVID, the police department was full of kids. They were doing digital learning. I could either say, no, you have to go home and stay with your kids, or bring your kids to work and they stay back here and we'll have pizza and they can play with the chief. So I can have officers on the street. So there's things that we've got to be doing, but you have to maintain that balance, and family is so vitally important. I have a granddaughter now. She's 4 years old. She is the light of my life. I tell my son all the time, if I'd known grandkids were this great, I'd have skipped you and went straight to her. And I'm going to have number 2 in November. Yes, she has her own pony that she made a unicorn for her birthday. But, I found, when I do retire, I'm probably going to be Zaylin's chauffeur. Because, I just really enjoy spending time with her, but I did have to miss out on a lot of those things. And it is so important. But if it is that critical life event, please, please, please try to be there, because they know, and it matters to them if you miss it or if you're there.
So, as y'all know, because I've said it multiple times, I don't have any kids, but for all the women or men in the room that don't have children, I still have family, and I still have friends that I feel like are family, so family. And for me, balance or just doing the best I can is so important. As you said, airlines 24/7, right? It's a 24/7 operation. I can be on a red eye one night from 11 p.m. Eastern, land at 6 a.m., and then my friend has an event at 12, and I'm like, okay, let me get to 2 hours now, I'll be there. I won't be great, but I will be there, So for me, my job is very different, and I think this is, y'all touched on just some reasons that women aren't in certain career fields. I think that that's one of the things holding back from women being in our career field. It's not that they're not capable, it's of being away, right? But there's flight attendants that are away all the time. However, Delta, for example, they have a 3-day schedule. We have up to like 5, and some of them are 2 weeks at a time if you're international, things like that. So you are away quite a bit. The things that I try to fit on my days off, like this is a day off, right? My car is currently in the shop. I just did a doctor's appointment yesterday. Like anything that I can fit on a day off, it is happening. Because I only have 2 maybe days that I'm in Atlanta trying to be there for friends, trying to take care of things at home. I do have a dog, so I have a little bit of a responsibility. She does have 2 amazing dog sitters, so she loves going to their house. She jumps at her bag all the time, like, are we leaving? No, you're with me. But so that's an amazing outlet for me as well. And I think that for me, I had to stop looking at what everybody else is capable of and just figure out what was best for me. So I said, okay, well, I got to be off for 2 weeks at a time. I just got back from Mexico on Monday. It was great, right? But I was there for a wedding, and I was a maid of honor, and my godson was born a month ago. And so it's like, if I'm getting all of these roles from my friends, I think I'm doing a pretty good job, right? They trust me in ways that I think that I've always wanted in a friend group. And then for my family, most of them live in Philadelphia, but my mom lives up the road, and so I'll just randomly call her like, hey, you free? I would love to come over, and she just makes food and hang out, and so that's always great. Or I'll invite friends over to the pool, things like that. So just figuring out what's best for me is my main thing.
All right, so we're going to get back to our guest in just a minute with one more question for them, but we do wanted to bring to your attention what is coming up next month. On July the 19th at 8 a.m., we'll have a live virtual event with Gianetta Jones. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer of Coca-Cola Bottling Company United. That's Coca-Cola Bottling Company United. And again, it's a live virtual event. And by the way, earlier this month, just this month, Coca-Cola Bottling Company United was recognized as one of America's greatest workplaces in 2025 by Newsweek. And so you're going to want to hear from this organization and their chief strategist on who has worked very, very hard to build an associates first kind of environment where employee engagement comes very naturally. So you see the barcode there, go ahead and scan it and register. So one more question, and that is, very briefly, what is the one thing you want to leave to this group out of all of the conversation we've had today? Beth, let's start with you.
First to Susan, thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. Like, this was soul food for me today. It really was. And the one thing I'll leave you with, I try to say yes as much as I can to opportunities like this because we're just such a connected world. And these two ladies, I'm so inspired by both of you, and like, you're in my circle. I just love this the commonality. We have so many dot connects to our lives and the things that we're going through, but the hope that we're bringing to not just women, but to others who are in a career that's high demand, that you can do it. And so, we're just such a connected world, and it's so important to get out there and meet different people and find that common denominator that brings the kindness in all of us out.
Mine is just real short. Silence your critics with performance.
Love that. Great soundbite.
Absolutely. Again, thank you, Miss Ann, for inviting me. She didn't tell you guys, but her and her husband had a critical role in my journey. They actually gave me a scholarship when I was younger so that I could fly. So it was just really awesome. So thank you again for that. But it takes a community, right? And I hope that you get from all of our stories and our viewpoints that there's not one way. Just figure out which way is right for you, and take every single piece of everything you're gathering here and otherwise in the world and just do it your way. That's it.
Well, we can't thank you enough. And so thank you all for attending. We have one more thing to talk about, but please stay still and know that how much we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Every time I come to the Women in Leadership session, I always think it's an amazing event, and this one was outstanding. So thank you all very much for everything. Among my many takeaways, I think I'm going to use the phrase "bless your heart" a lot. That's such a powerful phrase. I love that. So before we close out, just a really quick recognition here. Kathy Igo, would you mind joining me up here really quickly? Come on up. So Kathy Igo, who has been a rock for women in leadership, this has been a successful program in large part because of Kathy, has decided to step away from TurkNet Leadership Group full time. She is going to still be connected with us. You'll still see her here and in all of our Women in Leadership events, but she is stepping away full time and going to a contract capacity with TurkNet Leadership Group. So I just want to say for everything that you've done for us, as for Women in Leadership and for TurkNet Leadership Group, thank you so much. Well, at the same time, we also are welcoming Vicki Abelson. I know that Vicki's here somewhere. Oh, there she is. Vicki is joining us full time on Monday. She'll be joining us full time with TurkNet Leadership Group. Again, thank you all so much for being here today on this wonderful solstice day. Enjoy all of the sunlight, and hopefully the traffic isn't too bad for you. And have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.